I'm trying to think now. Can we come up with any good pun-based names similar to Cruella de Vil that secretary birds remind us of? I can't think of one now. Jono, I agree. Jono says that this is one of their favourite birds and that it is very prehistoric. I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of my favourite birds as well. And I'm really very glad that they've become regulars on these safaris because they're special. I can't wait to find... Well, we have found secretary bird nests. We haven't found any with chicks yet. Manu, shall we get a little bit closer? Since our secretary bird is being so obliging. Right, dare I say it, I've got a second chance at a link that I've already messed up the first time around. Let us go across to Tristan at essentially what seems like a crime scene.
We do have a crime scene, Jamie, and you didn't mess up your link. We are here, we are with you, and we are live, which was good. Now, this is a crime scene. You can see this whole area here has got massive amounts of fur, and this is from where Tingana had a duiker kill. So this is where he plucked the duiker. But it's really cool because often we don't get to see much of the fur, and we don't get to kind of break it down and have a little look at how a coat of these animals works. And you can see why he's plucking this fur. Look at how dense and thick, and you can even see it's quite hardy. If I poke a stick, it's difficult to get the stick through, but you've got this light grey, soft, kind of downy-like fur that's going to be the insulating layer right up close to the body, and then on the edge you've got much more bristly, harder, different coloured fur that kind of protects the edges of the duiker, and that's its camouflage. You can see it's got a slight little bit of kind of mottling effect there. The grey would stand out. The silvery grey colour would actually stand out in the bush, but this mottled effect that you get on the edges is going to all help with camouflage. So it's a bit harder as well, which means it's going to withstand the rigours of moving around in the bush, whereas the softer fur is going to really help with keeping this duiker warm. So it's a really cool thing to see, and also it's great to see why leopards do this. Imagine trying to swallow all of this fur, how much space that's taking up in his stomach where he can't get meat, which he can digest. This he's not going to be able to digest. It's also going to cause a massive backlog in his digestive tract as he tries to pass this. You can imagine trying to defecate all of this fur would be a rather difficult process and not a very comfortable one. So better for him to lick and to pluck with those teeth and get rid of all of this so that he doesn't have to waste the space to feed off something that he's not getting any nutrients from, and rather go after things that have got meat that he can actually digest and gain the nutrients from. So very clever way of doing things. But the other interesting thing about being here and under the tree where he was is that there is a really cool track that we've got for him, and something that we don't see every single day, and something that we certainly would battle to find on a vehicle. But we can actually see the way that he ascended this tree. So generally you would think, well, the duiker was in the tree, there's no ways that we're going to be able to know how he got it up there, but that is not true. Even 5-6 days later, when all the tracks have disappeared for the footprints, there is still signs that show you how this animal took, well, how Tingana took this duiker up a tree. So basically he came from there where he plucked it, he dragged it along to the base here, and then from here he jumped. And you can see here there is no signs of anything until we get to over here. So this is how he jumped. He landed up where I am now, and look at all the bits of fur from the duiker that have come off on this rough Tambuti tree. You can see lots of little bits of fur as we go up, and then in conjunction with this fur we can actually start to see claw marks. So if we look carefully, there's a claw mark over here, there's a claw mark over here where that foot dug in, and then up the tree, and then from here he then jumped across. There you can see his claw marks again where my stick is pointing over there. So he gripped over there, the duiker went on top, and then eventually way up into the top boughs of this tree. So that's the kind of path that he followed going up. When he came down and back up again, he used a couple of different methods. So he actually used this tree to go back up, and you can really see if I put my hand here, there we go. Sorry, Seb, have you got a branch there? Seb's got a branch that he's dealing with. Let's just give him a second. Seb, if you come around this way, I'll bend it for you. So we just have to do a bit of pruning to get his aerial through, because his aerial doesn't fit underneath the Tambuti tree, which is what happens out here. But what I was saying is, if you look here, you can actually see where his claws have gone in. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then his next move was over here where my stick is pointing, is another claw that's gone in and upwards as we go. So this is the route that he would have taken to go back up to feed. The night that we left him lying over there, and he came back and went up this way, and then on top and up he went. So really cool to see the kind of pattern that he used to go up and down, and it seems as though this was the kind of way that he went up and down a few times, because this is where the most claw marks are. The one that he took the duiker up, I think for some reason there must have been a threat to him, because that one looks as though it was a quick jump into the tree and up, whereas this is a much more slower descent. You can actually see he puts his claws right here, which is just him on his back legs, and then starts to jump and goes up into the tree. Really very, very cool to see. Now the other animal that's made use of this tree is not just a leopard. We were talking that leopards, and there's signs of the leopard being here, but if you look here, there is a lot of mud on this tree. So if I do this, you can see all the bits of mud that are actually starting to come off, and that's from elephants. So elephants that have gone and mud wallowed at Gowrie Dam then come behind this area, and they start to then rub, and they kind of rub their skin on here, and this will help with the exfoliation process, get rid of any parasites that they've got, any loose skin cells. And so this tree is being utilized by 2 of our largest sort of animals out here, and 2 of the big 5 in a short space of time, which is really quite cool to see. And so this tree's got lots of stories to tell its friends, that it's had all kinds of things happening to it. Now for those of you that are wondering what kind of tree this is a Tambuti tree. Now Tambutis often grow in groves like this in drainage sections. They require quite a bit of water, and that's because they produce quite a lot of latex. Now latex is a sap-like substance that comes out of this tree that is highly, highly toxic to us as people. So if we eat that, and we eat enough of it, we can die from it. Even the smoke from these trees burning is quite bad for us. We can get quite ill from that, and vomiting and diarrhea will come from it. But in the olden days, before such things as dentists, they used to use this tree quite a bit for toothache. So you would have taken a leaf, and out of that leaf is a small droplet of latex that will come out, and they would dot that latex onto that toothache, and it would deaden the pain and just help with alleviating some of the swelling and pain that they would have had associated with a bad tooth. The thing about these trees is that what amazes me about them is, if I look around me, every single one of the trees that you see around me is these Tambutis, and the reason why they grow like this is because these trees basically look after themselves, in that they will try and get rid of any other competition, one by growing faster than other trees, so they grow much quicker than the other trees that grow in these drainage lines, like leadwoods, jackalberries, scotias, those kind of trees. So they grow very quickly. Also, the leaves, when they fall to the ground, still contain traces of that latex. That then basically stops other plants from growing here. They also have a dense, shady crown, and so no light gets to the floor, and that's why generally Tambutis survive on their own in these kind of sections. It's really quite amazing how they can take over, and you get these groves of Tambutis that grow in these areas, and nothing else can really compete with it. So very cool tree to see. The other thing about this tree is it is a great tree for making curios, so carvings and those kind of things, which has actually led to this tree being quite endangered. So here in the Sabi Sands, there are hundreds of them, and they can be a little bit of a pain because they're a protected species, and we can't drive over them, and we can't get through them, and they create these dense groves that a lot of our animals like to utilize, and we can't really get to them. But outside of the parks, this tree is all but non-existent because of its valuable wood. People have cut them all down, and unfortunately not too many of them left outside of that, and that's why they're a protected species now in South Africa. But very, very, very cool to see. I just want to try and see if we can get some latex. So there we go. You can see a little bit, sorry, my fingers are all muddy from playing around at the dam, but you can see just a little bit of white coming out of this leaf. It's not very much because we're in the dry season now. In summer, if I did this, it would ooze big droplets of white out the end, but this is just the little trace of it that we see there. So we've got to be a bit careful with that stuff, and that's what comes out. If I had to take a panga and cut this tree, you would see big droplets coming out, but we're not going to do any of that because we don't want to harm the tree in any way. Now, Siberian Zumi, you want to know what is the jumping beans of a Tambuti. Well, basically, we're about to head into that time now. So around October, November, we should start to see it. This tree starts to seed, and when it's got these seeds on it, you'll find that there will be a moth that lays its larvae inside the seed. It's called a small grey moth. It lays the larvae in there, and the larvae then starts to feed off the nut inside the seed. And then what happens is, as the sun comes down on the seed, it causes it to get hot inside there, and so that larvae starts to wiggle and move, and the seed then actually drops off onto the ground, and you'll see the seeds bumping up and down and jumping almost effectively as that larvae is moving within the seed, and it moves around the seed along the floor. It's really quite amazing, and hopefully, last year we didn't see too much of it, but this year I'm hoping if we get a really good rain, hopefully we will get lots of those seeds, and it's amazing to watch. You put them on the dashboard of the car and they jump along down the bonnet. It's really absolutely incredible. So hopefully there will be lots this year. Like I say, last year was a bit of a disappointing seeding time for our Tambutis, but this year coming, hopefully it's a little bit busier. We need to rely on a bit of rain for that. Right, we're going to carry on southwards down the Milwaukee, go and explore. While we do that, let's go back to Jamie, who's got grey pachyderms that we are looking for.
One thing that I feel we don't enjoy enough of is a time with elephants here in the Mara. And the reason behind that is a lot of the time, just because the road networks are that much larger. Morning! There goes the balloon. Sorry, let me hold off. Hold on, everybody. Let's hold that thought. You can watch the Ellies. I'll wait for everyone to go by. Morning. 2 down, 4 to go. Morning. Right. Brief break. I miss spending time with the elephants just because the road networks are so much more spread out here that we don't often get into a situation where we're right up close and personal to the elephants. We do every now and again when we get lucky, and this was nearly one such moment, except that unfortunately we were just that little bit too late to watch them cross the road, and now they're disappearing off into the Mara River. But a collection of youngsters all around a very similar age, and actually, oh, there's an odd one out there. Spot the odd one out. There's one brave buffalo risking being chased by an irate mother. And it's not that the elephants aren't relaxed here. They absolutely are. We just have to make an effort to try and get those moments. Michael, tusk size and nutrition. I'm going to say yes, probably, but Jumbo. Sorry, Michael. I'm going to say yes, but not as much as genetics does. Obviously, some elephants have genes for big tusks, some have genes for little tusks, long tusks, thin tusks, you name it. They come in all sorts of different varieties. However, I do know what you mean, because of course the ivory has to be laid down, and it is a modified tooth. And as we know, within human beings, the addition of certain elements to our water and to our toothpaste, fluoride being an example, can have a massive impact on the way that our teeth actually grow. So yes, I guess there could be a nutritional aspect to it. However, I think that genetics play a far more important role, and it's really just trace elements that will affect the way that, or the growth of the teeth. So it's very, very minuscule amounts. I do feel like the elephants here are thinner, which perhaps is my complete imagination, but I don't know if it's just differences or if I'm imagining it, because technically there should be more nutrients here, and in fact the elephants would probably live just a little bit longer here because they're feeding off grasses for a large percentage of the time, which is a much softer food than, say, eating bush willow throughout a winter, which means their teeth might not wear down as fast. Just a thought as to the way that this ecosystem affects them differently. But tusk size, I think, is mainly a genetic thing. And in fact, the females here on average, have much longer, larger tusks than those of South Africa. Humans, of course, could play an enormous influence in that, and I think have had a tremendous impact on the tusk size of elephants on average throughout Africa, just thanks to poaching. Obviously, the bigger the elephant's tusks. Hi guys. Good, thanks. How are you? Good, thank you. Very well. What was I talking about? Tusk size, yes. Oh yes. Well, obviously the larger the tusks, the more likely that elephant is to be poached, and it has had a tremendously negative impact. Morning, everyone. 5 down, 1 to go. Rizzo in Boston. A very good morning to you. How large are these herds of elephants? Well, I would say that they were average around about between 10 to 15. This was a particularly large herd. I would say that there was probably about 25 elephants crossing the road earlier. Unfortunately, we just missed them. Most of them have melted into the trees. But you're looking at an average of around about 10 to 15. Remember, of course, that elephant herds are not territorial. They are not particularly aggressive with each other in any way, so you'll often find several different herds associating with each other in one sighting, which is always a lovely thing to see. And then, of course, you get a couple of hundred of them all gathering together. That doesn't really happen here so often, but it does in places like Botswana. You must have seen those amazing aerial photos that are just elephants everywhere. Bye-bye, Elise. I enjoyed spending time with you. I'm sorry we just missed you. Lovely morning. Okay, on we go. Our elephants have all but vanished. They are now just bottoms in trees. I think there's much of a difference in terms of physical body size between the elephants in the Mara and the elephants in the Sabi sands. I would say that there's much of a muchness. We spoke about how it felt in the beginning like they were a little bit smaller. I'm just going to duck briefly out quickly, if I can. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm going to get in the middle of your photos. Good morning. I don't think, we spoke at the beginning, we thought that the elephants were a bit smaller here, but I actually don't think that there's much in the way of a size difference. I'll double check for you and see what averages are out there and if there's much of a difference, but I don't think that there is. Chatting to Bob Poole the other night, he seemed to suggest that there are far fewer big tuskers in this particular area than he saw 5 years ago, which is a very sad thing to hear. We didn't go into the reasons why. It's just something that he brought up. It might even just be that they'd moved into different areas. That could easily have happened. But it is something that was raised, and obviously by somebody who spent a great deal more time in the Mara than I have. Quiet. Very, very quiet. Okay, we're going to go and search for some form of animal life, be it bird, mammal or reptile. Let's go and have a look at Tristan, who's taken some time to metaphorically smell the roses.
Well, yes, we have. Jamie, I'm not afraid to admit it. Sometimes you've got to stop and just smell what's going on around you. And this quarry bush is flowering, and it has the most pleasant scent. It's got a very strong kind of sweet smell to it, and that's attracted not only myself and Sebastian, but it's also attracting a lot of ants. And so there's ants that are...
Yeah, I've got a nice ant in shot.
Seb says he's got a nice ant in shot, so there's ants that are crawling around the flowers, and they'll be making the most of this nectar. Remember that the ants have had it quite tough over the last little bit, not too much to feed off during the winter months, and so they'll be taking the opportunity while there's flowers like this to be feeding as much as possible and get as much nutrients as they can. So like I say, it won't just be us that will be attracted to these flowers. Now, what do we have here, Seb? I think we've got a spider. I'm going to try and turn the leaf for you so that you can see it and you don't have to move too much. But let's see, maybe, hold on, if I try and get it a little bit more turned. There we go. So there is at least a casing for a spider. Whether it is an actual spider is difficult to say. It looks like the spider actually might have died, because there is a sort of husk of a spider and then an egg casing like this. Now, very common to see this with sac spiders. In fact, it looks like a little sac spider that was here. Sac spiders will often build their nests on leaves like this, where they fold the leaf around the nest and then silk and put the eggs inside there. So this is a very typical sac spider web that they will build, and I'm sure this was from last summer and it's now just still stayed here, because that spider is most definitely no longer alive at all. But cool to see. And in the summer months we're going to find lots and lots and lots of these all over the plants, as some of you may remember from previous bushwalks, and we're going to be able to see live sac spiders moving around. Now, a sac spider would be a lot more wary if it was alive, because they can deliver a very, very nasty envenomation. So when they basically insert their... it's a buffalo thorn, let's not walk into that. When they insert their fangs into you and they inject this venom, it's a cytotoxic venom, so it breaks down your blood cells and your muscle structure basically, and you get left with this horrible big necrotic wound. It's not very pleasant at all. And I actually had a friend of mine that was bitten on the shin, or should I say envenomated on the shin, and he left it, and it actually formed a massive big lump about that size, and it ate away at his leg, and he started to get this kind of dip forming, and it eventually even ate through some of the bone on his shin, and they then had to cut away and they had to treat it, and he couldn't walk. He was on crutches for about, I think it was about 6 weeks that he was on crutches for. So it's not something that you want to get envenomated by, and something that you want to try and avoid as much as possible. The other problem with sac spiders is that they will also go for your eyes, so they often bite people on the eyelids, which causes their eyes to shut. It's a horrible thing to go through, so try and avoid them as much as possible, and leave the sac spiders to themselves and let them kind of move around and do their thing. Ashton, you're wondering if there's many flowering plants and trees in South Africa. Well, yes, every single tree out here needs to flower in order to reproduce and to be able to seed or fruit or whatever it does. But yes, all of them do flower. The flowers just vary from very bright, big, colourful flowers to tiny, minute, nondescript flowers like we just saw on that quarry bush. But our spike thorns, like we see around us now, the tambutis, the marulas, the scotias, they all flower at some point, and they have varying sort of stages of flowering as we go through this now, the spring period into summer, so trees will start to flower more and more and more. We've just come out of the knobthorn flowering season, and we're going to go now into the guarries and the spike thorns. The sausage trees have flowered, scotias are starting to flower now, so lots of different trees will be coming out into flower. And while it looks barren and dead now, that will all change later as the rains come. As soon as we get a bit of rain forming, we're going to have a situation where this area will transform into a completely different section, and it will look a lot different. It'll be green, there'll be flowers, there'll be small flowers on the ground. So it's going to look a lot different in a few months' time. But definitely all the trees out here do flower and have to be able to reproduce. Now I'm just looking around because it's been a while since I've walked in here. I haven't done too much tracking in this general vicinity. Now what is this? This is quite cool to see actually, Seb, so if you want to come have a look here. We've got sort of sign of where there was a predator, so some sort of predator that has either regurgitated, which is what I think this is a regurgitation from a hyena, because they would be the only ones that would be capable of breaking bone that thick. You can see how this has been crunched down by some sort of predator, and lion and leopard, I suppose lions could be able to do this, but these shards are so big. This is typical of what you would see from a hyena's pellet when it regurgitates sometimes, these big bone shards, and how they don't cut their mouths and their throats with all of these bones. Some of those are very sharp, I don't know, but they have the power to be able to crunch that down and put that into the stomach where they'll absorb some of the calcium, and that's why their dung comes out a very different color to everybody else's, but that is most certainly hyena related. Very cool to see. It just shows you that you do find these things. At first, when I saw the white, I was hoping it was going to be a pellet from an owl, because owls will also regurgitate pellets, but obviously this is far too big and no owl is going to be able to break down bone of that size. So this is 99% sure is from a hyena. Right. Let's carry on and see what else is lurking down the Mulawati drainage line. It is so beautiful walking here, and we've got the best weather for walking this morning. We're having a wonderful time being out here, really enjoying it. And so while we do that, let's go back to Jamie, who I think is enjoying some sunshine in the beautiful plains of East Africa.
I have spotted a lion, or at the very least I've spotted some cars presumably looking at a lion underneath the favourite gardenia bush of the lions here. They are almost always underneath that tree. If they are on this side of the road, they are underneath that tree over there. Now the question is it the lovely lionesses that spend time around hippo pools? Oh, the rain has not done this any favours. Or, hold on, there you go. Or could it be that Scar is somewhere in the vicinity as well? Let us go and find out. This is where or close to where we filmed that amazing scene. Unfortunately, we weren't live. During a rehearsal! It's very rattly. Where the lioness nearly caught a hyena. I think the only reason she didn't was because she decided she didn't want to. Jared, you say please upgrade my creaky old jalopy to the smooth ride that the others have. You know what? Taylor's got my car, but I begrudge her not because it makes complete sense. Now, essentially, for these long days, obviously, and shame, don't call poor old Papa creaky. She'll fall apart on me and we won't get home. And Scott would be deeply insulted. She's really not that bad. I'm just being, the roads don't help. But she is a little bit bouncy, I'll give her that. But the thing is, when we go out on the all-day excursions and all-night excursions, there are times when we can't charge the vehicles. And by that I mean, obviously we have battery banks powering this whole setup to be able to transmit to you. And unfortunately, whilst all three Mara vehicles are equipped with a way of charging them through the car and the alternator, unfortunately Pucker's is not working. And there's a wiring problem. That's why our lights aren't working. That's why our battery died yesterday morning. So it's just one of those things. And for me, at least, I can go home, whereas Taylor's on the other side of the river, so she needs a functioning charger, DC-DC charger. So we give a lot of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, a lot of thought goes into who drives where and what vehicle, and of course Pucker's busy. Pucker's actually the best equipped in terms of the fact that she's got the roof rack cage thing, so we can sleep up there. She's got lovely mattresses. She's got a ladder so we can get up to the top and tighten our antenna. She's not that bad, hey Bucka? I gotta say that, otherwise she'll strand me here. Okay, what are we looking at, everybody? We all appear to be... Oh, I think we might have a male lion. Family Review Center, while we try and get ourselves a nice position to see which male of the musketeer lion. Hello, Scar. Hello, my boy. He gave me a dirty look as I pulled up. Maybe that's just his poor old face. There we go, everybody. Sorry, hold on, Family Review Center. 1 second. There we go, everyone. The magnificent Scarface himself. Iconic, with, I think, one of the best hairstyles of the Mara male lions. So while he dozes away, Family Review Center's question, gosh, that's a mouthful. Your question was on where we are, and is it a protected area where only certain people can drive? Yes and no. So yes, of course, it is very much a protected area, and these animals are very, very well protected in that sense. However, people can come and visit. They can drive their own vehicles in a way very similar to the Kruger National Park in South Africa. Provided they pay their gate fees, they can come in and they can drive themselves around. There are lots and lots of tourists who come into this area to view the lions, whether they drive themselves or whether they go with a tour company or whether they're staying with a lodge. All of that provides an income that is then used to keep this area protected. So it's important. There's a huge amount of maintenance that goes into keeping a reserve protected. Everything from roads to rangers to make sure that there's no poachers wandering about. In this particular area, veterinary care for the injured animals. There's lots and lots of thought and planning and effort that goes into protecting these animals. So yes, whilst it is a protected area, lots of people do drive around here. And of course, this is high season due to the fact that the migration is in the area. More people, more eyes to find us animals. So there you go. Marietta, male lions, they do a combination of things. Yes, they often travel around solo on their own, and that is because they have territories to patrol. They've got to make sure that their boundaries are well protected. And so what they'll do essentially is they'll wander off, they'll separate from the rest of their coalition, and then they'll rejoin often in the middle of the night with 1 or 2 members of the coalition. Sometimes all of them will gather back together, and then they'll set off on their own again. Sometimes they go and visit the lionesses, especially if the lionesses have a kill, or if perhaps one of the females is an estrus. But it's common to see them on their own like this. In the evenings that I've spent in this area throughout the night, it's fascinating because there are 4 males in this coalition, confusingly enough called the Musketeer Coalition, but this time involving lions rather than cheetah. And there's 4 of them, and it's interesting to watch. They kind of use this as a center base, this particular lugger. And one will come in and roar his way through, and then another one will come in and roar his way through and go off in the opposite direction. It's actually quite fascinating to watch. He really could not be more asleep. There's our Olololo. Oh, I forgot to tell you yesterday. Olololo means crooked, not straight. Olololo escarpment, the crooked escarpment. I forgot completely. Beautiful view. Oh, Fluffy, I think it was Fluffy, I'm not 100% sure, but Fluffy, I think it's you, who says that just the sheer size of him makes you sit in utter amazement. You should see when he walks next to the vehicle. I've had a few moments, and it happened with me particularly with the notch males on the other side of the river many, many weeks ago, where all of a sudden a male lion snuck up next to me in the dark, and I promise you, their head, if he wanted to, he could go and rest his chin on my driver's door. A number of times I've nearly jumped out of my skin with the sudden appearance of a massive male lion next to me. They are truly enormous and awe-inspiring and silent. Okay, well, Mr. Snoozy over here is going to enjoy himself a little bit of shade while he has his nap. Let's go back across to Tristan with something with a lot more legs.
These guys do have a lot more legs and are far busier than I would imagine our male lion is. Look at how many of these ants are crawling all over the place. So they're going all over the camera, up and down this knobthorn. And what I think has happened is because this knobthorn has been stripped by elephants of its bark, it's exposing areas where there's a little bit of sap. And I think these ants are trying to get at that sap and are feeding off it. And that's why there are just hundreds of thousands of them going up and down. It really is quite chaotic to see how many ants there are, and they're just moving up, and you see them feeding a little bit and then they go again. And the particular species of ant I'm not 100% sure of. I think we here in South Africa refer to them as red ants, but I'm trying to find their scientific name. I haven't found it just yet, but it looks like them. It's difficult to see though. Ants are not the easiest things to identify out here. There's not very few books on ants in South Africa, so I'm going to try to see if I can find an ant book, because as we get into summer now, so ants are going to be a big feature in what we do. But how cool are all of these guys? Isn't this just incredible? The tree is literally alive with all these tiny little microscopic ants going about their business, and they are in full active mode. There's lots of busy movement, and slowly but surely they're going up and down, like I say, and feeding off the sap that is being leaked out from the tree. But look at that, they're just everywhere. It's just a complicated mess. It looks like the traffic when you go to India or Ethiopia. There's just everybody going in every direction possible as they move around. Really is something that you would never see otherwise, and it's only because we walked within a meter of this tree that we noticed this movement. It otherwise would have been very difficult to see these guys from a road. And like I was saying earlier, this is why bushwalk is just so much fun, is because you see lots of different things that you would never be able to see from a vehicle. This would not be something that you'd be able to spot at all. We're also in an area way away from roads, and there's just this hive of activity. Look, and you can see how they touch each other every now and then, work out who it is, what they're doing, sending messages as to where they need to go and what they need to do. It really is quite phenomenal to see just how many there are and how they communicate with one another. And you can see there's a little bit of bumping into each other, but it's more just to kind of feel out who everybody is and get a pattern going again of up and down. I think us standing here has caused them to be a little bit more erratic in their movement. They were a lot more linear going north or sort of up and down earlier, but they're now sort of scattering around a little bit and just checking out what's going on. Maybe they're making sure that everybody's safe and not being attacked by somebody. The good news, you say there are so many. It's ridiculous how many there actually are. This is just a small cross-section of this tree that are going up and down, but there is a line that goes as far as I can see up the tree, and then there's on the other two sort of stems of this tree, there's also more. So it's just there must be millions of them. There can't even be thousands. I would say there's probably millions of ants going up and down, and they really are taking advantage of being able to get to this tree. And so this is what happens with elephants. We always talk about how elephants damage trees, but in their damage that they do, they're also providing a food source for somebody else. So even though this tree has been damaged by elephants and doesn't look like they've eaten too much, they've kind of stripped off bits of this cambium layer and they've fed off it, and they look as though they've damaged the tree. They have damaged the tree, but they've also opened up an ecosystem now for a whole bunch of other animals to survive. So they are vitally important to these areas, and while it's sad when you see big knobthorns like this being attacked, it is also incredible that there's millions of other lives that are surviving off of the elephant's work. And you can see just why they like the knobthorn tree. As they pull, the strips come from all the way down here. They can take it up, all the way to the top, so they're giving nice big long strips that they can feed off, as opposed to tiny little ones of the marula tree. And that's why the marula tree doesn't get hammered as much as what you see with these knobthorns. And so for those of you that don't know what the cambium layer is and what I'm talking about, this reddish sort of substance that you see here, this is all the cambium, and this is what is the transport system for this plant. So it's taking nutrients from the roots and then passing it through up to the leaves where photosynthesis is taking place, and back and forth. And so this is the most nutritious part of the entire tree, and why the elephants are after it. What is also really nice with this particular example of a knobthorn is just how clear the tusk marks are on this particular tree. If we have a look here, you can see these white striations here that are through. This is where this elephant jammed its tusk in and pushed to try and get bits of this bark up, and then it could strip it off. Obviously that's a very minute scale that I'm using, but if they were an elephant, they would break off much bigger pieces and pull it, and that's how they were able to do it, is by digging in their tusk into all these places. And this particular elephant looks like it must have been either a young male or a smallish female, because the height that we're at, if you see where I'm putting my hand, is where the tusks were, which means that the tusk height would have been about here, which is a younger individual. A big bull elephant, I wouldn't even be able to touch where those tusks would have gone. This is probably about where a big bull elephant would have been, is up there somewhere, and you can see that's where the strips stop. So this is more for either a female or a youngish male that was in this area, but still equally very cool to see. It's been a really cool morning of different tracks that we don't see often, and signs. And so I remember when I first started as a guide, we had these situations where, you know, we were taught that don't always just look for tracks. It's not always about tracks, and it's why the qualification when it comes to tracking is called track and sign. And it's because there's a lot of signs out here of a lot of other things that can lead you to finding animals, or to even work out what's going on in the environment around you. It really is super cool when you can sit and look and just break things down a little bit and find all of these little reliant systems that rely on each other, rather than, you know, just one big sort of animal that moved through here and you follow its footprints. You can work out lots of other things, and there's so much to learn on the way, and so much to see while doing that. And that's why tracking can be fun sometimes. Sometimes it's not about finding an animal, it's sometimes just about the process of following a footprint and leading you to all kinds of other discoveries as you go. And I know a lot of people always kind of define their tracking success as finding an animal that they were started out tracking, but for me, if I can learn something, see something new, that to me is a success just as much as it is finding an animal. Right, just careful down here, Seb. We don't want you to fall. We know that this morning the legs have been a little unsteady. There we go. So we were talking about it just now. It's amazing how after a bit of time of kind of intermittent walks, you kind of get a little bit not used to it. You start to battle a little bit with the way things are. What have you spotted?
I don't know.
So Seb has spotted a little hole here that we're going to have a look at. I'm not sure what it is. Let's have a little quick squiz inside there. Now, it could be for a small rodent, maybe something like a gerbil or something like that, because that's about the size of that hole. It's not really very big. Also, you could find a snake that would go in there. The thing is, so Seb says, oh great, as I say, snake. The thing is, though, it's not been active very much, because I'll tell you why. If you look around this particular section, there's not too much movement of the actual soil. There's quite a bit of grass on the inside. If it was something that was living here, this kind of stuff would be dragged away. We'd also see a lot more footprints going in. There is a few little things, so I think maybe a small mouse or rodent that might be living inside there, which is really cool. But well spotted, Seb. That's very cool to see. There's lots of different little things out here, and these kind of places where you get riverbeds where the sand is soft, you'll often find that gerbils and rats and things will excavate here. It's much easier for them than going somewhere else. It's difficult to see how far that goes down. I wish I had a mobile camera that we could stick down these things and see what's going on and try and work out what's living inside there. Imagine a kind of big scope that we could carry along with us. That would be super cool to go and see what's inside those holes, except if it's that big black mamba that's looking at you. Now, something else that is super cool and something that I'm a little bit jealous about is Jamie sitting with probably the most beautiful lion in the entire world.
Is that we've managed to reposition and find a slightly better view of one very sleepy Scarface. So he's probably had quite a busy evening. He definitely would have been roaring last night, probably patrolling and scent marking as well. And let's face it, he's not as young as he used to be. The time to sit back and relax is essential in his life. And you can just see the tip of that iconic scar just above his right eye. Don't think it's very difficult to imagine where he got his name from. And he's probably, I would say, one of the most famous male lions in the entire world. So many people know of this particular boy. And of course, it's easy to see why. And if he sits up, he might hear something, or a hyena might come trotting past or something like that. You can see just how very, I guess charismatic that scar makes him look. We spoke about this yesterday, the fact that we've been looking at a lot of young male lions, but look how magnificent this full mane is. Ashlyn, male lions at the cub stage, no. Their survival rate is probably the same as that of a female cub, so of their sister or their female cousins. It's actually once they get to around about, let's say, 3 years old, and it's time for them to leave their pride, that they seem to have a much, much harder time of things than the females do. And yes, then their mortality rate will be higher than that of the females. So between 2 and 3 years old. So remember, the biggest threat to a lion cub is a strange male lion, either nomadic or a territorial takeover, because they will kill the cubs in order to bring the females back into estrus. And generally speaking, the cubs are safe, the female cubs are safe from around about 2 years old, but from then onwards, the male is thoroughly unwelcome by the males that have taken over, if they're not his or don't think that they're his father, and he's got to go off in search of a territory of his own. Now, if it's a male cub with siblings, other male siblings or other male cousins, generally they'll move off together, and that's just because, well, there's safety in numbers. It's much easier to compete for a territory. You'll probably find their survival rate is slightly higher, but it's a tough life. A male lion is only really going to be able to compete for a territory at around maybe 4 or 5, if there's a lot of them in a coalition. It's tough. You saw that young male lion that we were with yesterday afternoon and yesterday morning. Imagine him squaring up against a male like this. You would be running away in a heartbeat. And actually, that brings us to the one animal that probably does follow the herds quite regularly, and that is male lions. Nomadic male lions will not exactly follow the whole migration, but they will adapt their movements to stick with the herds for a little bit, because they're not as bound by territorial boundaries. He looks like he's brushed his mane this morning. It's all neat and fluffy. What's that at the background there? Is that Sabi's? What's happening there? No, not Sabi's. Tommy's. Thomason's gazelle. Moving through in the background. He's not going to bother himself for a Thompson's gazelle. That's basically the equivalent of a chicken nugget. Sorry, Chantal, please can you repeat that question? I know it was on a lion's mane, but I didn't fully get it. So Jake, you're wondering about the lion's mane and the colouring within the lion's mane, and what starts to change it to that black colour. Age is essentially what triggers it. The older they get, the more melanin gets deposited in those hair follicles, and the mane starts to grow very, very dark. And you'll see that the tips of the roots of the mane will start to change to a bit darker here, around about 3.5, 4. You start to see a little bit of darkness to the mane. They're not as blonde. Obviously there's a genetic factor as well, and they will then continue to grow a very, very dark mane. And research has shown that, first of all, the ladies quite like dark-maned males, big dark-maned males. It's a sign of essentially strength and virility, and that other male lions, particularly blonder male lions, will be quite intimidated, or more intimidated, by the mane of a male. Look, I mean, that's the sort of, that's experiments done using fake lions with blonde hair and blonde manes and then dark manes, and studying the various reactions of the lions to that particular threat. Interesting to watch if you happen to find yourself searching for information on that. There's also a genetic aspect to it, so certain lions in certain areas will have darker manes than others. Joe? Absolutely not. That's the wondrous thing and the clever thing about the females. So the male lion can't judge by scent which cubs are his and which cubs are not. They know, remember, animals know each other, especially territorial animals like lions or leopards. They know each other on an individual basis. So a male lion will know which female he has mated with, and therefore he assumes that those cubs are his. If he's mated with her and she has cubs, he's going to assume instinctively, I'm not sure that there's a huge amount of thought that goes into it, but instinctively he's going to assume that those are his. And research has shown that in some cases about 50% of the cubs are not in fact the cubs of the dominant males, because, well, quite simply put, lionesses, female leopards, they're sneaky cats. And if they see an opportunity, particularly when in estrus, they will mate with a male, whether it's the dominant male or whether it's a nomadic male. And he has no way of knowing whether or not he is actually responsible for fathering the cubs. One of the things that will be fascinating to learn is just how much this goes on with leopards. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why we've been collecting scat on Djuma for the past 2 years, probably longer, but in my case 2 years, so as to be able to test the DNA of the cubs and figure out their paternity. It's easy to figure out who mom is, but dad is a little bit trickier. Hey boy, it's tough being a cuckold when you don't realize. Rizzo in Boston, lovely to hear another question coming through from you. The females will not mate with the same male. No, not necessarily. Often what you'll find is that lionesses will synchronize their estrus cycles, not necessarily at exactly the same time, but very close together, which is why it's useful being in a male coalition, and why, generally speaking, the male lions, there's infighting, but it's not too serious, and that's one of the reasons why they're content to form a coalition, even if they're not related to the other male, because they will have the opportunity to mate with a female. If you've got a male coalition that's in charge of 2 different prides, that could be at least potentially 8 different females. Oh, there we go, he's up. There's that iconic scar. Sorry, I'll finish that answer in a moment. Just an opportunity to view him. Oh boy, back to sleep. Has it been a tough night? So, mating takes a lot out of a male. Takes a lot out of the female as well, but it is essentially a non-stop affair for 5 days. During that time they're not interested in food. They usually won't eat. They do occasionally. Oh, it's being cutesy. They usually won't eat, and what that results in is, let's say now the female's out of estrus, the male's mated with her 4 times an hour for 5 days, he hasn't eaten, he's feeling a little exhausted, and then the next female comes into estrus. The first male will move off, go and find himself some dinner and recover his strength, and the second male will move in and mate with the female. So each and every male coalition will get a chance to mate with the different females of the same pride. It's different in cheetah, from what I understand, although I think that our understanding is changing. But in cheetah, generally speaking, they're a little bit more picky about their coalition members. Obviously we've got an interesting situation with the musketeers across the river, but generally speaking you'll find that cheetah coalitions are brothers or cousins, and that's because there is one dominant member who usually does the mating. Right. I'll catch my breath after quite a long-winded answer. Let's go across to Tristan, who is playing with poo again.
I am. This time it's a slightly fresher, more softer consistency of poo, and it's not from a nasty predator. This is just some processed vegetation. You can see that it's fairly still quite moist. I mean, it's hardening up quite quickly now, so it's from the early hours of this morning. And this particular poo is from a giraffe. So the interesting part about this, though, is that you can tell that it's what time of the year it is just because of this giraffe's dung. When giraffes generally defecate, they normally either walking or if they're standing, because of the height that they're at, their poo tends to drop and then bounce offwards and out. And normally what you'll get is a situation where you're going to get quite a spread amount of poo everywhere. You're going to get a lot of dung everywhere, and it's going to be in small little balls wherever it drops. It's very seldom that it sticks together. So you can tell that this particular individual has been having a bit of a problem with eating solid food because there's not enough moisture for those to actually break apart. They're stuck together at the moment, which has caused these to be, you can actually see the fibrous nature of what it's been eating that has caused all of this to stick together. It's very uncommon. Generally what you would find is more something like this over here, where you just have the one together. So it would confuse some people as to what dung this was, because giraffes generally have nice clean pellets that come out, but this individual has been eating something very fibrous, and that's why it's all stuck together and looks a little bit different. Interestingly enough, though, this giraffe must have walked here fairly recently. I would say probably within the last sort of 2 hours, given that this has still got a bit of a shine to it. And the other thing is that was really cool is that we had a yellow-billed oxpecker flying over. So yellow-billed oxpeckers, we don't see them very much in this part of the world, and I'm sure it's from that giraffe because it kind of flew over and it was calling, and it was something that we wouldn't have seen typically around here. And I was saying to Rex, and Rex and I were talking about just how yellow-billed oxpeckers are very seldom seen on the smaller animals in this part of the world. We don't see them on the impalas and things like that. They're mostly on our bigger animals, so like buffalo and giraffe. And, well, there's the signs of the giraffe where the yellow-billed oxpecker just came from. So, good news, and hopefully we'll see our yellow-billed oxpecker. I really like them, and they're not animals or birds that we see very regularly. Like I say, it's typically only on buffalo or giraffe or some of the other big animals that we get here, and so it'd be really nice if we did see that guy on drive this afternoon. It must be a pair or at least an individual that hangs around, because we're again near Chelapan, and this is all the times that I've seen the yellow-billed oxpecker. They are there. So ML, you're saying, where are my socks, and am I not worried about snakes and ticks? ML, no, not really worried about either of them, and actually with socks, well, I don't know, I just prefer to be like this. I don't really like wearing socks that much. I have got socks on underneath, but they're just like little secret socks, look. So there's socks inside my shoe, but at the end of the day, I don't really like having long socks on. They get covered with burrs and all kinds of things. You might as well just throw them away. So for me, it's better like this, and in fact, if you wear fellies most of the time, you're supposed to go sockless, but I just prefer with socks on. And the thing is about snakes and ticks, at this time of the year, ticks we don't have to worry about, because they haven't had rain yet, so there are not too many ticks around. There might be the odd one, but very few and far between. And snakes, the ground is quite bare. If you look at the ground at the moment, it's really quite sandy and open, and so I would be able to see any snakes quite easily before I stood on them, so don't have to stress too much about that. But when it comes to summer and we start to get a lot more vegetation and ticks become a bit more of a problem, as well as, snakes moving around, you will see on Seb's feet. Seb, show your feet, because you've got what is needed to protect such things. So there's what is called gaiters, and you put gaiters on, and that gets your socks sorted and makes sure that you don't have to worry about snakes and varying other things. So I will wear gaiters when it becomes summer, but today I felt like I wanted to go gaiter free and explore, and and it's been fine. There's no burrs or seeds or anything else to worry about, so it's perfect to walk around without the socks at the moment. So you're also worried about the snakes aspect and whether we need to worry about them. Well, I mean, we don't really need to worry about snakes, and I'll tell you why. Snakes out here, yes, there are a lot of dangerous snakes, and there's snakes that could definitely cause death to a human, but most snakes are absolutely petrified of people. So they hear you coming, and don't forget, when we walk, we kind of quite heavy-footed, and we provide a lot of vibration that gets sent out towards wherever that snake could be, and that snake picks it up, and it's already going to try and start moving away. It's not going to be aggressive to you. It doesn't want to hurt you. We're too big for them to hunt. So most snakes are trying to get away. The only snake that is a real danger in terms of us walking around is a puff adder. Now, puff adders lie in wait, and they sit in the grass. They're incredibly well camouflaged, and that's why I say in summer when it gets thicker, you've got to be a little bit more careful where you put your feet, because you might stand on one of those and they could potentially be a problem. But the rest of the snakes are not worried about you. They want to try and get away. They don't want to get in any way hurt by you. And the only time that people get bitten by snakes, well, 99% of the time that people get bitten by snakes, is when they're either trying to catch them and play with them, or they're trying to kill them and they're trying to go after them. If you just leave a snake alone, it will always opt to try and go away from you rather than come at you. There's no reason for it to be aggressive. It doesn't want to risk injury. It would rather move away. It's much like most of the other animals out here. They're not these possessed beasts that come flying at you and jumping out of trees at you. Really, it's not how it works. They're creatures that try and get away more than anything else, and so no, we don't really have to stress about them at all. In fact, in all the time that I've been walking out here, I've never once had an incident where a snake has scared me or given me any reason to stress about what I'm doing. So snakes are actually a very cool part of what we do, and while they might be slithery and might be horrible things to look at, for some people, they're vitally important. They keep our rodent population down, and they are incredible animals that they can survive the way they do. And when you see them, the way that they move and the way that they position themselves, it really is quite amazing. So I quite like snakes and having them around. They're an interesting creature, and they fit in, and they just like anything else, is that they're vitally important, and they all kind of balance each other. So we need them in this area. And in terms of walking, they're not too much of a stress, so it's all good. So, Ginger, you've got a misconception about black mambas, and you're saying you heard that they don't travel on the ground and that we should be scared of them. And well, black mambas are a nasty snake, and that if they get you, you're going to be very unhappy with life, because that snake can cause a lot of damage to you. In fact, it's very potent venom in it that will kill you within 3 hours if you're not careful. So the thing about black mambas is that they are aggressive. They are snakes that are highly capable of killing, but they're actually not snakes that will go after you. When they are aggressive is generally when they're in a confined space, so when you get them up against a corner or something like that, and then that's the only way to protect themselves, is to lash out with this potent venom. But in terms of them traveling, they'll travel on the ground, on the trees, they go everywhere. They like to spend time in trees, so they are arboreal snakes, and they hunt a lot of birds, but they do spend time on the ground. I've seen more mambas on the ground than I have in the trees, so it's not a snake that you can see only in trees. It will travel on the ground as well. Also, not every tree is connected, so if they were only tree dwellers, they would have a tough time, because they'd be stuck in the very same tree all the time. Luckily, though, you'd think that we'd see a lot more black mambas than we do. There are lots here, make no mistake. There's black mambas all over the place here, but very seldom do we actually see them. They hear the vehicles coming or hear us walking. Generally, they move away quite quickly. It's only when you surprise them every now and then. Seb, do you remember the last time we were here? So I'm trying to... when we sat with Tingana and we tracked our honey badger with the white-tailed mongoose.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So this is an area that we were tracking a honey badger, and I remember we went with Seb, and Seb came with me because I was talking about it at that time, but when we're tracking, often I just go by myself and we just kind of quickly do it. But this particular time, because it was such a rare track to see and there was this drag mark, Seb came with me and we had this cool experience of trying to track and find, and we eventually found the carcass of the white-tailed mongoose. No honey badger, unfortunately, but we did find the carcass, which was really cool. Now, I'm going to carry on. I'm going to start turning back northwards to the lodge, but while we do that, let's go back to Jamie Patterson in East Africa.
I really didn't want to, but there were so many vehicles waiting to see him, and all they could see of him was his bottom, and it didn't really seem fair for us to hog the best possible spot the entire time. So I decided it was just better for us to move out. There's lots of people for whom this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it would have been grossly unfair for us to not have allowed them the chance to go and see him. So we've moved out, we've let them go in and have a look at him, and there's still more cars on their way. So we shall leave and find something else to look at. And if I'm feeling really patient, which I might be, perhaps we shall wait for these eddies. They're going to... Remember I said I miss the close opportunities with elephants, and we seldom get them because of the distance between the roads. There's a herd of elephants. They are coming to follow the exact path of the elephants from earlier. Shall we wait for them? What do you think, everybody? Shall we wait for them to get to us? What if they stop and just decide to munch on some bushes over there? I don't think so, though. They seem to be relatively determined in their forward motion. Let's sit here for a little bit and watch them make their way slowly but surely towards us. Very interesting question from James, and one that I confess to not know the answer to. While we watch our elephants, we've spoken about the resources of this particular area. So James is wondering, since essentially the conditions remain much the same here all year round. Yes, there's a dry season, and then there's two wet seasons, one that's slightly larger than the other. What is that? Must have been a plane. Did you hear that, Manu? Or was that an elephant? Are they talking all the way across the Mara? No, I think it's a plane. Right, so essentially wood, trees and flowers and fruit, or trees, fruit and flower, more than once per year. I don't know the answer to all of that for all of the trees. I will say that something like a sausage tree, producing those fruits and those flowers takes an immense amount of the tree's energy and resources. And what that means is that in South Africa, sausage trees don't actually even fruit every single year necessarily. So I would suggest that here that it would be very similar, and probably the sausage tree will only fruit at once per year, perhaps at different times of the year though. I've noticed that there's a whole outburst of little white flowers. I suppose that in terms of flowers on the ground, perennial flowers, I guess that a lot of rain will also hamper their growth in the beginning. James, I'm not sure. I'm going to do some asking around, and I'll try and find out for you. And of course, the more time that we spend here, the more we'll be able to answer those sorts of questions ourselves. My suggestion would be that for the most part, it would be once a year for most of the plants. But I'm not sure. Not certain. The Ellie's advancing slowly but surely. Now we've got to pick their trajectory and put ourselves in the right place. We've got plenty of time to do it, but they've also got plenty of time to change their minds. Come on, Ellies. Don't stop there. Come and say hello. Frank from Michigan, while we watch our elephants. Elephants are interesting creatures. You want to know how far they travel per day. They could spend an entire day not moving more than perhaps a distance of, let's say, 2 miles. It might just be one of those days. They spend the entire time chilling out in one particular spot. Then all of a sudden they get it into their mind that they are going to mission and that they're going to move, and in that situation they could easily move 20, even 40 miles in one day. And I'm including the night in that. I'm talking about a 24-hour period. They can march when they want to, and the poor little babies have to run to keep up. But they cover distance when they really want to. It's easy for them. What to them is a gentle stroll, for us we'd probably have to walk very briskly to keep up with them. They've got long legs. They cover distance fast. What is interesting is that in dry seasons they'll cover a greater distance, and that's just because they're moving between water points and moving to where there's better food. So they'll move a greater distance during the dry season. During the wet season, it's not uncommon for them to stay in the same area. Especially in South Africa. I mean, I'm still learning about the elephants in the Mara, but especially in South Africa, they'll stay in one area for a couple of days at a time, if there's plenty of food available. It's circumstantial. Hi guys! The early morning is obviously getting to that poor lady. She was having a little doze. Ryan, I have had elephants come within centimeters or inches of my vehicle. There is a very solid boundary to that though. They are not allowed to touch my car. It has happened to me before. I have had an elephant put its trunk on my car. I've had an elephant put its tusk on my car. That was back in the day when I was slightly less experienced and I wasn't able to read the signs in the same way that I am now. And also I wasn't entirely sure exactly how firm to be with that particular elephant. Since then, that happened once, I learned my lesson. I don't let elephants touch my car, but I will, in certain circumstances, let them walk right by us. I've had elephants, especially in Djuma where we don't have a door. I have had elephants walk past me to the point that if I wouldn't have even had to straighten my arm to touch them. And that is entirely circumstantial. You can read an elephant's body language from a long way away and decide whether or not you're going to let them get close to you, or whether or not it's going to be a problem if you do. And particularly breeding herds. They give you very, very clear signals. This herd is entirely relaxed. And in fact, we're going to move forward now so that we can put ourselves not in their way, that's not the intention at all, but so that we can put ourselves slightly closer to them when they do cross the road. I think they're on their way to go and enjoy a little bit of the fresh Mara River now that it's rained, and maybe even have a mud bath. Taylor, apparently, has been enjoying her morning mud bath. Must have got stuck.
Can you copy me? This is ridiculous. I mean, I give up. Am I live?
Oh dear, it seems as though Taylor's disappeared. Chantel, you'll have to tell me the tale as to why Taylor's covered in mud. I'm desperately curious. Is everything alright? Or was it just from driving? Manu, let's get a fraction closer. Ah, okay, she's been spraying herself with mud whilst driving. We can see the elephant path where it crosses in front of me. That's the path that they're walking on, that's the path that they're going to take, presumably, on their way towards the Mara River. So we're going to sit here just a little bit out of their way and let them come to us. It's the best way to have close encounters with animals. Letting them come to you. Then it's their choice. It's their decision. Alright, let's quickly head over to Tristan and we'll be back here shortly when the elephants get a little bit closer.
Well, welcome to another mystery that we have over the road. I believe Seb was telling me that Byron had a mystery track that he had the other day with Herbie, and no one was sure what it is. But I'm not 100% convinced, but we think maybe, just maybe, that this could be a track for a pangolin. Now, the reason why we're saying that is you've got a very wide drag, which is very typical of a pangolin's tail, and then you can see a tip that comes through the middle of the track. So that would be the edge, trip, and then over here, if you have a look, there are toes that are there, and then a pad that comes back like this. So that would be the length of the track there, which would be the right size for a pangolin. But difficult to see is another track over here. It's definitely not monitor lizard, because if you look at the toe, we can't see any real big claws. Monitor lizard would have a really massive claw coming off, and these are not the front claws from a pangolin either. So difficult to say 100% sure. It's not a very clean track right here. Rex is busy following that way just to check if he can't find this if it is a pangolin, curled up in a ball somewhere under the trees close by. But because this kind of weather is the best weather for them if they are around. But I'm not 100% convinced. I don't know what else it could be, though. That's the thing, is that this is a very odd pattern. And you can actually see here, you can see little striations even inside there, which could be the little hairs that are on the stomach of a pangolin as it's walking. So they have a tail, and there's a little kind of hairs that striate on the scales themselves as well. So that could be from a pangolin crossing the road. It's definitely from last night. I drove here last night on the way home, so it's over the road and going into the bush. So I'm a little look and see if I can find this. Maybe we get lucky and find a pangolin. Wouldn't that just be the most ridiculous way to finish our bushwalk this morning? I certainly would be quite happy with that. And while we do that, I believe the elephants have gotten much closer to Jamie, so let's go across to her with her Ellies looming over her vehicle.
Here we go, entirely worth the wait, I feel. I might have got their trajectory slightly wrong, but I don't want to push close while they're crossing the road. But there we go. Our herd of elephants marching across the road in front of us. I love moments like this. It's gorgeous. All together in a line, like something out of the Jungle Book. And there comes the old female walking behind. Walking behind like this, bringing up the rear, she could be the matriarch. She could also be the matriarch's sister or older cousin. So essentially the older females in the group, often the matriarch will walk behind and her second in command will walk in front, or they'll swap around. So the matriarch will walk in front and the second in command will bring up the rear. The incredible structure of an elephant herd. And the protectiveness of the females. 40 years, sometimes 50, 60 years worth of experience makes them perfectly suited for commanding a group like that. Nicolette, while we watch our elephants wander off towards the river, being so large, there is only, apart from human beings, of course, which we're not really talking about, there is only one predator capable of catching and killing an elephant, and that is a lion, and it's very rare. And the only reason lions can do it is because of their ability to hunt together as a group, in a pride, often with males involved, but not necessarily. There's certain areas where lions have specialized. I'm just going to move off the road so that this car can get past me. They've actually got plenty of space. Oh, God, he's going to go that way. No problem. Let me go out of your way. That one I was not expecting that way. Shame, he was trying not to block us and the elephants. So there's certain areas in the world, Santa, where lions have specialized in hunting elephants, and it's usually the young males that they hunt. There's no point in trying to hunt the larger females. They're just too protective. Okay, quickly back across to Tristan so he can show you a truly fascinating set of footprints on the ground.
Right, so you can see I've gotten the book out to show you what I'm talking about with pangolin tracks and why I was talking about the toes that this animal has. So if you look there, you've got small little rounded toes that are in the picture. So these are tiny round toes that are separated. 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth one over there. Now, if we look at the pangolin track in the book, you can see the same thing, small little round toes over there, and then this big pad at the back, which would be the pad coming off the back section over here. So it is a pangolin track as far as we can see. I mean, Rex and I have looked at it carefully, and it looks like it. They are, like I say, small little tiny lines, which are almost impossible to see. I was showing Seb these just now, so you've got to look nice and deep, but there's tiny little lines here, which would be from where the scales, they have a very rigid sort of like small little ridges on them. When they drag, they can sometimes leave tiny little lines in there, and so it went off into the bush. Oh, there was the antenna. That just hit me in the head. Ouch. And then it went off into the bush on this left-hand side. Now, Rex has just done a few loops because often pangolins will lie under trees at this time of the day. And I was saying earlier that this kind of weather, grey, overcast weather, is perfect conditions for pangolins. Most of the pangolins I've seen have been in similar weather like this. And so it's a good time to look for them. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere under one of these bushes is a pangolin that's lurking. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it's maybe has made its way towards a termite mound where it's gone inside and curled up and is now going to rest for the day. But exciting nonetheless. Whether we've seen the pangolin or not, just to know that there's evidence of one here is really, really cool. And so we'll keep looking. Tonight I'll even come and do a loop around here and let's just check. We might get lucky, we might not, but it's worth a try. These tracks are most certainly on top of every other track that was out here this morning. There's no other tracks that have gone over the top of us, so it's from the early hours of this morning where this animal then crossed over and into the bush, which is super cool. It really is an amazing thing. Unfortunately, I don't think Rex has found anything, so we'll try come back a little bit later and have a look around and see if I can't find where this pangolin went, because that would be the most amazing thing to find. I think we've only ever had one pangolin here in Safari Live, and it was with Brent right on the boundary, so it'd be really cool to find another one. So for those of you who don't know what a pangolin is, it's basically like a little scaly anteater that moves around, and they are incredibly rare. So we'll definitely try and see if we can find that, and while we do that, let's go back to Jamie and the Mara.
Oh well, the bushwalk team heads back home. Poor old Taylor. She's been trying so hard this morning, and all she's been smacked with is gremlins along the way. So Taylor's been out this morning, as you could tell by the fact that she was covered in mud. But unfortunately, gremlins just not on her side today. But I'm sure she'll be up and running through this evening. Forgive me, we've got to get through this bumpy patch. But they're already fixing the roads back there. It's just inevitable after the amount of rain that fell last night. I wonder how much we had. Must have been 50 mils, I would guess. Possibly even more. It rained heavily for a solid 2 hours. Someone else is having a nap. I always have a little chuckle because generally speaking the safaris go out quite early and they go out all day with a packed lunch for the guests to enjoy. And you'll often see some very tired faces and some sleepy people in the back. Rebecca, who's got quite a sad question, but unfortunately one that I'll have to give an honest answer to. That zebra. Oh, stop. Has he stopped? And zebra's over there just having such fun in the mud. Oh, he's up. He's up. Sorry, Manu. After all that, he got up again. Well, let's watch the zebras cross the road, because it does bring us on to Rebecca's question. Not often. But yes, animals can get hit by cars. It doesn't happen frequently, and if they are caught doing so, they will be in severe trouble. Whether it's for, nobody drives too fast here. Most people are completely cognizant of the rules. Yes, it happens. It happens here. It happens in Kruger. It happens in the Sabi sands. It's very rare, but it does happen. And yes, they would be in serious trouble provided somebody caught them in that kind of situation. It is unfortunate, it is one of those realities, but it really doesn't happen often. And I mean, I haven't seen any roadkill here. The most common victim, I would say, is, or most common victims are the birds at night, nightjars in particular, because if people are driving with their lights on quite fast, on the dark road, they might not actually see them, and then they don't turn their lights off and they hit them. It does happen, but it's rare. Tortoises sometimes fall victim, chameleons, but again, most of the time that's outside of reserves, where the reserves have carefully controlled speed limits. And This morning we've seen at least 3 different ranger vehicles, all keeping a very close eye on what people are up to. So it does happen, but not often. The biggest danger when driving around, in particular in Kenya, throughout many African countries, biggest danger in terms of driving outside of a reserve, especially at night, is, oh, look at the one on the left having a roll, is cows, cattle, donkey, goats less so, they tend to move out of the way, but cows and donkeys. AB, let's have a quick look at the zebra, the front zebra. Which one is the front zebra? Is it that one? You want to know if it is pregnant. It's particularly rotund, actually. It could potentially be. Zebra are barrel-shaped at the best of times. Oh, another one's having a roll in the mud. So I'm not 100% sure, but yes, she could be. It is a female. Oh, look at that. Having a roll around. Apparently, we were speaking about zebras giving birth. Apparently, we missed one not too long ago that actually gave birth, and it was right close to the Angama camp. I was quite devastated when I heard that. So zebra are barrel-shaped creatures. They just are so gassy in the way that they digest their food, and as a result, it gives them this very rotund appearance. Even an unhealthy, hungry zebra is round-bellied. That one is pregnant, the one walking towards us. The one sort of in the front of the queue. Those two, I think, are pregnant, left and right. Zebra's the only animal, when it rolls in the mud, or at least the only... what is the word I'm looking for? The only general game species when it rolls that will roll all the way over. Wildebeest will roll, but they'll roll on their sides. Zebras will roll with their feet right up in the air. Isn't this beautiful? The wildebeest might not be around, but the zebra are. Stunning. And they're going to come walk right past us. Or not. We just sit tight. Let's give them an opportunity to come to us. Lovely. Lots of nice fresh puddles for the animals to drink at. They don't even have to worry about the risk of going down to the river. Lovely comment coming through from one of our viewers. I didn't catch the name. Sorry, Chantal. Whose comment was that? ML. ML, absolutely. What a wonderful way to spend a work day. Nobody telling me where specifically I need to go, what exactly I need to do, what I must show you, what you need to look at. It is very much a very pleasant existence. I love it. And yes, we have certain goals, we have certain focuses, and we do try to balance that. But it really is lovely every now and again to just go on a bumble, which is what we've done this morning. We've gone on a little bumble. We've gone to see various creatures. We've stopped at everything that's caught my attention. That's a lovely way to spend a day. Yes, we have focuses, especially because, of course, we're telling the story of the migration at the present time, which is why both Taylor and Brent are going to be on the other side of the river today, keeping an eye on where all the wildebeest are. But I'm here, in solid signal with solid comms to Bumble for today. I couldn't be happier about it. My goodness, the other day we spent 3 hours with a serval. Nobody can complain about that. Ooh. It's amazing how quickly zebras go from affectionate to actually quite angry with each other. Okay, on that note, I hope you have all enjoyed our really relaxed morning out here between South Africa and Kenya. It's time for us to do our farewells and our thank yous. So thank you to Manu, as always, for his wonderful camera work. He, of course, is telling the story of what we're seeing, as well as to our Djuma crew back in South Africa, to Chantel and Alice in Final Control, and to Megan in Final Control and Djuma. Most importantly, though, the biggest thank you goes to all of you, of course, as it always does. Thank you for your questions, comments. I look forward to enjoying your company in a few short hours.